It's that time of year again, folks! This party's getting started, and guess what? It's crazy! There's so much stuff to talk about, I don't know where to start. Maybe at the dawn of suck with Squeenix AI art. The layoffs sure were bad this year.
Their workers all have disappeared.
Now watch as greed and dummies tear this industry apart. There's a million fearsome ways to fail. Oh, why do they make the same mistakes again?
Really stupid businessmen.
There's a million fearsome ways to fail.
They all should be in jail.
And we'll count them down right here in this top 10. No! Indie games are great, but a few made some mistakes, like losing all support for your game of flying drakes, or adding broken fighter guys,
And then leave the game to die.
or say your game is punky when we know that claim is fake.
There's a million fearsome ways to fail.
For a bluey game was crap.
Oh, why do they make the same mistakes again?
They cannot stop the cap.
There's a million fearsome ways to fail.
Flee the guarding of the veil.
And we'll count them down right here in this top 10.
You could try getting paid making Ninty emulators. Get your new game localized with the cringe translator. What about 10,000 stores of worthless NFTs? Or be the death of goodness that was Kill the Justice League?
Threatened by a racketeer so they can get a check.
Or try to sell a piece of $700 tech?
Or journalists can do their thing.
And stupid takes on everything.
Or making gaming movies that are nothing but a wreck.
Don't worry, we still have Sonic, do we? Yes, we do.
There's a million fearsome ways to fail. Bet they made this game on meth. Oh, why do they make the same mistakes again?
Mocking Toriyama's death.
There's a million fearsome ways to fail.
These games are really getting stale.
And we'll count them down right here in this top 10.
To list your game, the fans have paid.
You fail.
Saying your new game's quadruple A.
You fail.
Really any game by Ubisoft. All the other games that took $1 million loss.
You fail.
Screw things up and give yourself some raise.
You fail.
Killing off your game in 14 days.
You fail.
Force you all to play a PSN. We'll count them down right here in this top.
Mr. Joker's reckoning bot.
Count them down right here in this top 10. So, how many workers can we lay off from this company? Probably another BioWare. Yeah, EA hasn't done much this year besides layoffs, but everyone their CEO is doing that, so I can't fairly single them out. Nope, it's their rambunctious child BioWare doing the fail, and yeah, it's Dragon Age Veilguard. This game, by itself, is a middle-of-the-road action RPG, but it's also a Dragon Age game, which means there's an expectation to live up to, especially for a franchise that hasn't been seen in 10 years. Firstly, your choices from the last 3 games barely matter. Like, there are maybe 3 choices that do anything. That alone is a big turnoff, but it gets worse. Remember how in Origins, how your choice of race, background, and class dictated the entire first chapter? Or how in 2, where certain characters and plotlines were locked depending on if you were a mage? The character creation background options here are utterly vapid and don't open any meaningful quests or conversations. The entire game feels like Dragon Age for kids. Like if you decide to run a D&D campaign with teenagers with their parents around. What do you mean I can't kill that random NPC? What do you mean I can't commit polygamy? Okay, DM, my mom went to the restroom. Can I please brainwash the soldiers to betray everything they hold dear and become my servant? Wait, my mom's behind you. Oh no, she has a belt. Run, DM, run! The whole game feels like that. And I'm not the first person to point this out, but it rings true. Most of the dialogue feels like a corporate report going through HR. no huge stakes, no dire consequences, no potentially offensive dialogue. Everything is all sanitized, and being even slightly disagreeable is a huge no-no. While yes, the game does have a few times where characters are angry with you due to your decisions, unlike in other games, they don't leave in disgust. It really isn't until the final level that feels like things are happening like a normal Dragon Age game. Though we do get a few characters from previous games coming in, they are really mischaracterized compared to their previous iterations, so that's a bit of a bummer. As for the combat, it's standard action game affair, but without too much substance. Sure, it has a class system, but I have it on good authority that playing as a warrior sucks. I mean, I wouldn't know, I always go for mage. Enemies in higher difficulties have their stats super inflated too, so it's become more of a chore than anything else. That's why you see people recommend you play on easy for the best experience. Lastly, the art style, while not terrible, feels way too goofy for Dragon Age. Makes me wonder if this game really is rated M. Oh, it is? Doesn't show. Again, the game itself isn't bad in the overall scheme of things, but it doesn't feel like Dragon Age. After several years of fantastic Western RPGs that brought forth new ways to tell a story like this, Veilguard feels like a regression. I hope we get a game worthy of the BioWare name in the future. Until then, still have Baldur's Gate 3. Let's not kid ourselves. Western gaming is in a steep decline. I mean, look at the Game of the Year award nominees. Not a single AAA Western title. So the obvious question is, what happened? Well, a lot of people have opinions on that. And opinions are just like mouths. Everyone's got them, and they all suck. Both sides of the internet's polarized culture war have tried everything they can this year to dig up controversy where there was often none to begin with. Or, at the very least, their overblown scandals that were relatively small potatoes. Exhibit A. Sweet Baby Ink. Now, just mentioning them might cause some buttholes to clench, but thankfully, I have learned to speak both fluent Chud and SJW, so I will try to sift out the bullcrap. First off, there's no denying that Sweet Baby Ink has its own set of failures, such as their very insensitive tweet against the recently passed Akira Toriyama, as well as adopting a sort of racketeering tactic for getting consultants hired onto projects. They're basically saying to developers, "Hey, that's a mighty fine online reputation you got there. It'd be a shame if something would happen to it." So yeah, their hands aren't exactly clean, and their reputation didn't exactly improve after their involvement with that game. More on that later. However, while Sweet Baby Inc. has been involved in less than satisfactory Western AAA titles, it's still incredibly unclear how much influence Sweet Baby Inc. had on these games. And yes, while it is fair to seek and notice patterns, correlation is not causation, and part of remaining factual is avoiding sensationalism. Basically, don't do what everyone did in regards to Palworld. Upon release, this game was hit with accusations of AI misuse, plagiarism, condoning animal cruelty, and human slavery, the most infamous one being,
It's a ripoff of Pokemon!
a lot of these accusations were thrown around with so much reckless abandon that it was hard to tell what was factual and what was misinformation. I will say this, however, Palworld is not a Pokemon ripoff. It's an Ark ripoff.
Why did you even rope me into this? Because he roped me into this. Well, him over there, he roped me into this. Well, he roped me into this. Well, what about me? He roped me into this. Well, that one over there roped me into this. Well, he roped me into this.
Okay, jokes aside, the line between ripoffs, parodies, and inspired by is a conversation for the courts, and we'll get to that later. Anyway, hey look, Black Myth Wukong is a thing. While it wasn't a game for me, I'm happy it still found success. However, it wasn't without its detractors. Journalists weren't particularly kind to Black Myth Wukong, mostly because it lacked female representation. Oh, but don't worry, Screen Rant. I'm sure that other Eastern games in 2024 will have a female lead that people will definitely celebrate.
Benevolent savior, hero.
Yeah.
And a big old dump truck of an
Again, we'll get to that in a bit. But people on the internet have also gotten mad at Black Myth Wukong's development team for sending a list of guidelines to people who wanted to stream the game. Now, when talking about this, I'll acknowledge two things. Yes, they could have worded their list of guidelines a bit more gracefully, and two, Both this and Screen Rant's diversity complaint came about due to past allegations made against the dev team for promoting a sexist workplace culture. But I will say this, I don't feel like the dev team did anything wrong by asking streamers to cool down on the politics. I do the same thing for my streams because I just want to play a good video game with my audience. These devs clearly know just how heated political conversations on the internet get, and you can't blame them for wanting to put a lid on irrelevant discourse. Speaking of politics surrounding video games, Ayuden Chronicle 100 Heroes came under fire for its English localization being too politicized. And then there was the Paper Mario 1000 Year Door remake, which had... wow.
I'm not touching that one with a 20-foot pole.
Well, moving far away from that, I want to finish up this entry by talking about arguably the dumbest online discourse this year, Stellar Blade.
Big old dump truck of it.
Remember that earlier joke I made about Black Myth Wukong lacking female representation? Well, Stellar Blade has you play a female character that has been deemed by the internet to be too sexy.
Big old dump truck of it.
It's basically the same deal as Bayonetta and 2B from Nier Automata, where people say that the whole game is bad because the female main character is so sexually objectified. I think the fact that Stellar Blade is a painfully dull hack and slash is more worth getting mad at than
A big old dump truck of it.
Of course, when the devs behind Stellar Blade did tone back the sexiness, people will get uppity that they censored themselves to appease the SJWs. There's just no pleasing the internet.
I want the attention! I want the attention!
I try not to get political with these fails lists anymore, especially because there have been instances where it's backfired. And quite frankly, all this internet discourse is why. People on both sides of the spectrum have no chill. It's always woke this, bigoted that, and it starts to get suffocating when all you want to do is just play a good game without angry moralizers breathing down your neck.
Kids, you're both just awful.
I know that internet controversy isn't exactly a new thing, but this year was probably the worst it's ever gotten. Doesn't surprise me, honestly. 2024 was an election year after all. Let's just move on before we start adding more fuel to the internet's ongoing flame war, shall we? On paper, being a gaming journalist sounds like it'd be a cinch. Just give fair, unbiased reviews, report right or wrong doings within the industry, and bring me photos of Spider Sonic! And yet, gaming journalism has problems with activists pretending to be impartial, as well as overwhelming evidence of soft bribery.
Stop cashing checks and report the news, jerkies!
We've had plenty of instances of faulty journalism in these fails lists, and golly Moses did they deliver again this year. We just talked about Veilguard, but this fail is for the journos specifically. The number of reviews stating that Veilguard was a return to form for BioWare makes it so transparent how in the pocket of the devs they are. And of course, they tried to backpedal, salvage their non-existent integrity by writing articles critical of the game a few weeks after the review dropped. Gamers were not fooled. And before we discuss the poster child of crooked reporting, I want to briefly bring up one embarrassing incident with IGN. Oh, good old IGN. You can't spell ignorant without them. They've got a tried and true history of posting embarrassingly basic and uninspired reports, mostly based on whoever offers the bigger check, or their own skill issue. This year, they decided to take a shot at Mario and Luigi Brothership by giving it a ludicrously low score. Ah yes, how can another major Mario title compare to the sheer quality of Imagine Party Babies for the Wii? Of course, IGN did count on one thing. People actually liked Brothership. In yet another welcomed union, the community wasted no time clowning on IGN for, well, being IGN. It's weird. Usually we say the Nintendo bashing for Kotaku. Speaking of, yep, once again, the problem child of crooked journalism secured a place on this year's fails list. So what have they been up to this year? Well, for starters, they tried to combat concerns over the Minecraft movie trailer with, "You can't criticize this movie, cause it's for kids." These are also for kids. Kids deserve quality. Your excuse is as lazy as your research skills. They also committed not one, but two writing faux pas by plagiarizing from Cosmonaut Marcus and outright stealing a story from Did You Know Gaming. Guess they had to steal from other stories after these two embarrassments. For one, they called the basic accessibility options in Alan Wake 2 pointless, and later corrected it. Gee, whatever happened to Sekiro needs an easy mode for people with disabilities, fellows? Not only that, but you know Astrobot, the universally acclaimed game that rightfully won Game of the Year in December? According to Kotaku, it's a soulless Sony cash grab. Look, Sony screws up a lot, but a good game is a good game. On the other hand, I don't encourage piracy because of my own skill issues, so what do I know? But arguably the most insane thing was committed by one of the writers, Alyssa Mercanti.
Come fight me.
In May of 2024, said writer got into conflict with YouTuber SmashJT after he called them out for their blunders. How far did she go with this? She DM'd his wife's private social media account, trying to gaslight her into leaving him. Okay, on a normal day, Kotaku is just petty. This is legitimate harassment and cyber stalking. The man has a family, for fuck's sake!
Editor here with an update to this story. While editing this video, Melissa Mercante has taken legal action against SmashJT for defamation, all the while going on a tweet purge, which is not a wise move in a defamation case. If a judge so much as glances at this case and it doesn't burst into flames, then this suit very well might put other media commentators at risk. So let's give a round of applause to Alyssa Mercante for making life harder for everyone else and securing her spot for 2025's fail list. Anyway, back to the video.
Look, I still firmly believe that there are good people working at Kotaku who actually know what they're doing. But I'm serious when I say they need to change. Keep the reviews balanced and unbiased, and do stricter background checks. Otherwise, they're better off pulling the plug. The industry's got enough crap to deal with daily. Why be part of the problem? Okay, we're done with the stupid stuff surrounding the games industry. It's time we get to the real meat and potatoes of the list. The stuff you all came for. So, who's on first in this year's Hall of Infamy? Oh, of course it's you. Randy. Oh, Randy Pitchford. How you are still working in the game industry to this day is another mystery. And this year's arguably been Gearbox's most embarrassing year, which, believe me, is saying a lot. Let's start with the obvious one, the Borderlands movie. Movies based on games have seen a bit of a grace period, with Mario, Sonic, and FNAF in particular proving you can make a film that caters to fans and actually be entertaining. Well, here comes the Borderlands movie to remind us just how abysmal these films can be. The Borderlands film is just bad. It's a contender for being one of the worst gaming-based movies of all time. And that's saying a lot. Awful writing and comedy, a predictable story that did nothing interesting with the world, and a cast that leaves everyone baffled as to why. The stoic, no-nonsense Roland? Comedian Kevin Hart seems like a great choice. The movie bombed hard, and Randy, who all through the lead-up was so proud to say, "Guys, it was me who made this for you guys, the fans," completely switched to getting mad that people didn't like the film and blocking fans who said they didn't like it, until trying to say, "Oh wow, I'm proud Hollywood couldn't make something as amazing as me." But if you want a gaming failure specifically, look no further than what happened to Risk of Rain 2. Fans were pretty skeptical when Gearbox bought the rights to this indie roguelike looter shooter, and it turns out their fears were absolutely warranted. The launch of the new Sinkers of the Storm update under Gearbox was met with insanely harsh criticism. Not only were many of the new additions like items and characters borderline unusable or overpowered, not only did the new enemies border on unkillable for the game, but the game came with glitches that completely broke the game's mechanics, even making it literally unplayable on some consoles. Many people resorted to down patching, because even if you didn't get the DLC, the update itself was just that bad. Oh, you want to know how bad it was? After the fact, the developers released a roadmap. Not for new free updates or new content added to the DLC, but just for fixes. I know historically roadmaps have become synonymous with companies trying to assure gamers with vague promises and claiming that we totally have a plan, but that's usually for new content. Gearbox messed up so badly, they needed a roadmap for something that's already out, as if this paid DLC was just a beta test. Gearbox's reputation this year has sunk below any conceivable metric. Their fans have been through a conga line of disappointments, and it's hard to have any hope for the future, especially since the CEO just doesn't stop embarrassing himself. Okay, sure, Randy, compare yourself to the Beatles if it makes your ego feel better. Nobody's falling for your magic tricks anymore. So, curiosity, show of hands. Who is expecting the recently announced Borderlands 4 to end up on one of these lists when that comes out? Place your bets!
It seems like we got a pretty good thing going, and I like my job. I don't want to give it up to a couple of robots.
You can't stand in the way of progress.
Once again, we're starting a segment on AI misuse with a VeggieTales clip. They're like the PG Simpsons in terms of prophecy. It feels like every year, it doesn't get any easier to remain neutral on the use of artificial intelligence in entertainment. Shockingly though, the games industry kind of backed off this year. Kind of. Because, yeah, it doesn't excuse those instances when it did happen. Let's start with a certain Doge purveyor, shall we? Yep, in 2024, Elon Musk himself announced that he was interested in getting into the gaming industry. To be fair, if Bill Gates can enter the console wars, Musk might have a chance. Just one tiny problem with his plan, however. He seems to believe that incorporating generative AI into his game development will make games great again. It's gonna be huge. While he hasn't actually failed anything yet, he is doing a very poor job of inspiring confidence. Let's take a look at the companies that are already doing it, much to my chagrin. So remember that one dev that made a non-consensual replication of Angry Birds? Well, now we've got the actual Angry Birds devs making artificially generated promotional art for Angry Birds Block Quest. The promotional art had several discrepancies, like Chuck's feather piece being yellow instead of black, weird lines at the bottom of Red's body, and yeah, what is up with those plants? Rovio would confirm this by saying that they understand why it sparked frustration among the community. So why did you do it then? It's almost like you could have hired actual artists to prevent such discrepancies in your promotional art for your mediocre block puzzle game. How does one put so much care into not caring? Speaking of AI art, let's move on to another big offender, Square. They literally opened the year with an open letter saying they were going to invest more into AI. Lo and behold, Square would use AI-generated images for their little Splatoon clone Foam Stars. And supposedly, this only made up 0.01% of the game. That they're admitting to. And surprise, surprise, Foam Stars lost 95% of its player base 2 months after launch. Then, in December of this year, it was announced that Square would release its final seasonal update for Foam Stars in mid-January of 2025. So that makes 3 failed AAA live services from Squeenix.
Do I hear 4?
No.
Moving on from the plagiaristic art, now let's look at the highly automated theft of other parts of the industry. After all, 2024 would be the year that Ubisoft would unveil their new AI-powered Neo NPCs. It was hyped up to be the most innovative gaming revolution that would change the way we talk to NPCs forever. Yeah, like, seriously, I don't even need to make a joke here. Like, I'm reading the script right now. We don't even need to make a joke. That's just the joke. Ubisoft is a joke. Sure, they did hire real narrative designers to design NPCs that were only then enhanced by AI. But the prototypes for these AI-powered NPCs were limited and unnatural. Garbage in, garbage out. And this barely even scratches the surface of Ubisoft's blunders this year. We'll get to all that later, but now I want to talk about Aperture Sight, Valve. Though at this point, I think both of these companies are interchangeable, especially since Valve announced in 2024 that they would be responsible for distributing a vast majority of games developed with AI. I'm sure all the opportunistic scammers, prospective developers, will absolutely disclose that their game uses them. Now, part of this new policy does state that Valve would make sure that it is known to consumers when a game is committing plagiarism.
AI-generated assets.
But honestly, with how anti-AI gamers have become, I doubt that Valve or even the devs will be making money from this endeavor anytime soon. And that's if Valve is being honest. But don't worry, there's at least one company that's honest about its highly automated theft, and that company is Netflix. In 2024, Mike Verdu was named VP of Gen AI for Netflix Games and openly admitted to using AI at the cost of people's jobs. Geez, so much for just being another tool. You guys are making me look like a clown just for trying to be optimistic. Anyway, what's our last bit of AI misuse for this entry? Huh?
Okay, alright, you're f***ing with me.
Oh, how I wish I was. At the beginning of this year, SAG-AFTRA made a deal with Replica Studios that allowed voice actors to make AI-generated replicas of their voices for video games. Huh. I could have sworn that there was a big strike over this. Oh yeah, that's right, there was. Oh, and get this, SAG-AFTRA would go on strike again this year over pretty much the same thing that was last year's strike involving AI, this time specifically for video games. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think this is what a union is supposed to do. Oh, and I'm not done. In October this year, SAG-AFTRA signed an agreement with Ethovox to make sure that their voice actors get protections against AI. Great move. Why didn't you do this sooner? You go out of your way to partner with a company that is hell-bent on committing highly automated theft, and then you strike about it to the point where you need another AI voice company to give you protections? Like, no disrespect to all the boots on the ground fighting, but I'm not confident these guys are actually in your corner. While there weren't nearly as many instances of AI misuse this year as there was last year, the times that companies did misuse AI are just begging for lawsuits. Yeah, knowing the industry by now, something tells me that this is just the calm before the storm. I know some will advocate for AI, saying we need to keep moving forward and all that, and while I concur to some degree, we need to remain ethical, because the misuse of generative AI isn't just bad for the gaming industry, it's bad for all industries. Yep, we have a new face on our yearly fails list. Let's give a round of applause to Warner Brothers! Yeah, evidently they decided screwing over movies and TV shows wasn't bad enough.
Do not blow this for us.
The time finally came for them to enter the world of AAA Mismanagement. They made an attempt to delist more than 50 games from Adult Swim, only to backpedal at the last minute. I'd say it's less we dodged a bullet and more than we dodged a shotgun blast to the head. For now. Of course, that was just a warm-up for their real fail this year. Live services! Let's get the big one out of the way. A poorly made third-person looter featuring bastardizations of iconic comic book characters. A complete waste of a perfectly competent developer that... Hey, wait a minute. Oh, haha, very funny writers putting Avengers on another fails list. Wait, it's a different game? Ugh, these things are practically the same at this point. I swear you could write this part with Mad Libs. Actually, come to think of it. People were initially excited when the developers of
Batman Arkham Games
announced a new game. However,
Squad, kill the Justice League!
Was everything the fans didn't want. Rather than a
single-player experience,
Squad, kill the Justice League!
Was instead a multiplayer-focused live service game. The game would later be delayed, leading some fans to hope it would be better, but the release proved otherwise. On launch,
Squad, kill the Justice League!
Was criticized for its
or combat technical state,
character progression systems,
and its
insultingly terrible deaths of beloved heroes.
As a result, the game was a critical and commercial flop. Rather than take the L,
Rocksteady
assured gamers that they were committed to the game for the long term. Of course, not even the introduction of
that Joker
was able to keep the game alive. Eventually, the company confirmed that the game would no longer receive updates after January 2025. But why have one live service disaster when you can have two?
Yeah, that's one fine-looking live service game. Why doesn't mine look like that?
After being MIA for a year, Multiverses returned to an uproarious chorus of
hey Multiverse, thought you were dead.
What could have been a perfectly fun platform fighter was utterly eviscerated by its monetization system. Either pay through the nose to unlock the characters you actually want, or get ready to grind like it's your full-time job. At one point, a particularly egregious system was introduced and received so poorly that it got patched out. But don't worry guys, it was just a bug.
Yay! Yay!
Miraculously though, it seems the gamers finally started to wise up to the AAA song and dance. Multiversus was a complete flop that cost Warner Brothers tens of millions. Won't be long now before they shut down their first game studio.
Oh, thanks, Freddy, foreshadowing.
Oh, Ubisoft. Again. Don't get me wrong, I love tearing them down after all the shenanigans they caused, but it's more, I'm annoyed at myself for once saying they weren't evil, just stupid. And yet, year after year, they prove younger me wrong. But hey, I'll give them credit for this. At least they have the common decency to suffer and die slowly. Over the course of the year, Ubisoft has been finding itself in a financial downfall. Gee, can't for the life of me picture why, considering you spent like 650 to 850 million on Skull and Bones. They boasted that the game was a quadruple A level game. Okay, if you're gonna call it that, you better actually release these games when they're ready. Seriously, everything it did was done way better back in Black Flag or Sea of Thieves. And look at that, they dropped the price. Well, at least they had a brief moment of self-awareness. Briefly. Well, hey, Star Wars Outlaws did pretty well, because they bribed a bunch of outlets and influencers for positive reviews. Wow, money well spent yet again, fellas. Meanwhile, in the real world, the game had a game-breaking bug that forced an entire restart. And the $110 edition. And oh, look at that. Even with the shilling, the sales figures were still laughable, like the company itself. Oh, and Assassin's Creed Shadows was delayed till early 2025. That means we don't have to talk about it here, right? Oh, I wish. The discourse surrounding this game was another mind-numbing poo-flinging contest between the wokes and the chuds. But let's try to stick to the facts here, of which there are a few. Ubisoft apparently based this game off of the historical Black Samurai Yasuke, and they sourced this idea not from Japanese historians, but from Thomas Lockley, a white guy who made historical speculation. To be charitable, we can't fully blame Ubisoft for being bamboozled like the rest of us, as it was something that everyone in the West, including academics, just kinda took for granted. After all, there is historical evidence of Yasuke existing, but what he did and what his role was in Sengoku Japan society is very unclear, to the point where there's a ton of misinformation about the guy. What we can blame Ubisoft for is trying to save face with the "history is up to interpretation, guys," while simultaneously claiming that their game is respectful and historically accurate, when Japanese laymen can point out various anachronisms and cultural faux pas while drunk.
Let's look at that map. What is that map? Does this map look okay? Does that look like Japan?
Nah.
This is supposed to be Hokkaido here.
だってこの時代北海道って全然違うエリアだよ。It's not part of Japan. 1700、1800ぐらいだね。
This happened in the 1600s, right? No, we needed to talk about this right here. This is egregious. You do not have permission to use this Butsuzo statue in your game, Ubisoft. Nobody does.
Yeah.
Nobody is granted permission, and nobody gets granted permission for this. This is a religious symbol that they specifically say to not use in media.
There's also drumming up artificial hype for the game with bots, but we don't have proof that Ubisoft was behind that. But it only gets worse from here on out as they lock entire quests for the game behind pre-orders. Speaking of, the pre-order merch is so painfully tone-deaf that it borders on parody. Oh, and they're basically forcing you to link your Ubisoft account and have Denuvo running so they can prevent you from cheating in a single-player game. You know, this eerily reminds me of when Sony pulled something similar and got charcoaled by the community, and take a shot, we'll get to that soon. Now that would have been all, except right as I was finalizing the list for this year's Fails Countdown, Ubisoft got hit with 2 more blunders to really end the year with a whimper. They ended up facing a class action lawsuit when they announced they'd be shutting down The Crew. They attempted to remove it from people's libraries and half-heartedly offered refunds to anyone who bought the game recently. Not really the issue there, gents. But hey, everything's all hunky-dory because, in their executive's own words, gamers should get used to not owning games. I think he said the quiet part out loud. Look on the bright side, at least we still have X-Defiant and it's gone.
X-Defiant, which launched back in May 21st, 2024, and it'll be sunsetting not even a year after its launch.
I'd honestly be surprised if they somehow survive 2025 given all the hits they've been taking recently. Just don't expect them to take accountability. Seriously, Ubisoft, is it that hard to say sorry for anything? All you do is pick up a ukulele and—
No!
Sony. What the fuck was this year? Seriously, math professors are using the whiplash you gave us to teach parabolas. EKGs of marathon runners are less sporadic. A line drawn by a seizure patient would be straighter than the topsy-turvy year you had. Okay. So, what happened? Well, it all started with a simple case of Boy Meets Girl, or a game about managed democracy met annoying online account requirements. For some reason, Sony decided to make it a requirement to have a PSN account in order to purchase and play Helldivers 2 on Steam, after the game was released. Okay, this isn't completely new. Ubisoft and EA have been doing that for years. We hate them for it, but we dealt with it. Well, the big issue is that you can't have a PSN account in 170-ish countries. So, no account means no playing that game you just bought. So, of course, the internet reacted calmly and rationally by review bombing the game until Sony backpedaled. That's great! Too bad Sony decided to do the same thing with other Steam ports that came this year, including God of War Ragnarok, Ghost of Tsushima Remastered, and Horizon Zero Dawn Remastered, which are all single player. It boggles the mind why they would require it to begin with. Speaking of Horizon, Sony went out of their way to have people buy the remaster over the original. Everything was good at first, allowing players to upgrade their version of the game to remaster it for a discounted price. Then, Sony upped the price of the original Horizon to almost double what it was, so they don't lose money on people buying the remaster. Then they removed the OG version entirely on PC, so people were forced to buy the remastered version. You think that's slimy? Remember the fun PSN requirement issue? Okay, enough about Steam. Let's get to the real show. Let's be honest. Did any of you know about this game before its release? It was announced over a year ago with an Overwatch-style trailer, and we didn't hear anything since. Then it came out and its player count made Overwatch 2 feel good about itself for the first time in months. It was so bad that Sony pulled the plug less than 2 weeks in and then shut down the studio a month later. Say what you want about multiverses, at least they had a chance to come back. Firewalk, more like fired walk. And let's not forget the report on how they spent anywhere from $200 to $400 million on the game that only lasted a week. Last but not least, the PS5 Pro. Why do you do this, Sony? Congrats! You made a digital-only machine with an advanced frame generation that could go up to large resolutions with no effort. Good job, you were absolutely the first to do that. I get that it would be easier to grab that over a gaming PC, but $700, Sony? Plus, we need to pay extra for a disc drive, so hope you didn't have a bunch of physical games.
So, what you're selling to us is a console that your audience already owns a version of, that most developers will not optimize their games for, and whose biggest selling point is how it can make a 4-year-old game look a bit better.
Exactly! What part of this aren't you getting?
All of it.
This is just an Apple Vision Pro. Just something super expensive that people can brag that they have, despite cheaper and arguably better options. And if you were PC savvy, there's especially no reason to get it, as Sony keeps releasing its games on PC too. I think the only games that are still exclusive are Astrobot, Last of Us 2, oh wait, never mind, and 7 Rebirth, wait, never mind that too. So yeah, Astrobot. Can't wait to spend $700 for that! Despite all of this, there were a lot of things to hype about Sony this year. The 30th anniversary of PlayStation, Freedom Wars Remastered, Ghosts of Yotei announcement, and of course, Astrobot. Astrobot alone showed what happens when a small team, passionate about what they're creating, obtains huge success as a result. So much it became a message to others in the games industry about what truly makes a good and successful game. Games like Baldur's Gate 3, Balatro, and Final Fantasy XIV, like pretty much what Capcom and Nintendo have been doing for years. Sony better take this to heart, but I'm skeptical since they knew to do this during the PS4 era. Yet they still decide to go down this path. We shall see. Oh wait, I forgot. They still want to grab Kadokawa specifically for From Software despite their stubbornness in putting Bloodborne on PC. We're doomed. Nintendo, top 5 to dishonorable mention. Would have avoided it entirely if not for the usual copyright shenanigans. Still, improvement is improvement. Nintendo nuance. The situations with Palworld and emulators are a little more complicated than just Nintendo bad. I mean, it is bad, but it's not entirely Nintendo's fault. Look at these videos as to why. Glide the Dragon, fully funded, demos out. But then comes a complete production overhaul. It's almost like you should treat your staff well or something. Zukosis, Pocket No Man's Sky down to a tragic staggered development. Redemption story to be decided. Them's Fightin' Herds, added 2 characters that broke the game and then fired the mods and devs. These guys just can't catch a break. Square Enix, $140 million loss, but hey, they bounced back. For now.
You are the chosen one! Bring balance to the force! Not leave it in darkness! And why should I care?
Shall we then?
On last year's Fails list, when ActiBliz managed to get #1 for the 3rd year in a row, I mentioned that ActiBliz would turn into MicroBliz in 2024. You may also recall that I said,
I look forward to absolutely nothing changing.
And guess what? The strangest thing happened. Absolutely nothing changed! In fact, things only got worse for Microsoft, and only after the acquisition of ActiBliz. I swear, it's like these guys are a virus in the gaming industry. Now, does this technically make this the 4th year in a row that Activision Blizzard finds itself at #1?
No. Your eyes just darted to the left. You're lying, aren't you? No.
It's a bit complicated. But in the spirit of showing just how corrupt Microsoft got because of them, and because I'm unoriginal, I decided to group the fails of ActiBliz themselves with the fails of Microsoft. That'll make this year's #1 extra juicy.
Lightning rounds.
Remember that first batch of PvE content that was promised last year? Well, big shock, the mission sold so poorly that ActiBliz put the kibosh on PvE forever. This essentially means that the original, much better Overwatch game died for absolutely nothing.
You murderer! You killed my brother!
Speaking of the downward spiral of Overwatch, Activision Blizzard's policy change made it so that Overwatch 2's dev team will receive a grand total of 0% of profit-sharing bonuses. Oh, if you think that's bad, this just leads us nicely into... A lead staff member came forward in a thread on Twitter about his absolutely horrible experience working for ActiBliz. He stated that when he asked HR for information regarding a promotion or pay raise, they straight up gaslit him, saying things like, "Why would we pay you more than we have to? That doesn't make any business sense." Oh. The final straw came when Sayers was forced to work for 3 months without pay, and he got victim blamed when he confronted the higher-ups about it. I'm just gonna say it flat out. This is slavery. I mentioned how ActiBliz has underpaid their workers in the past, but the fact that it went from the higher-ups paying very little to nothing at all is inexcusable. Last year, H2M announced that they would be releasing a mod for Call of Duty Modern Warfare Remastered that would bring back classic gameplay elements from Modern Warfare 2. They were finally ready to release it this year, only for ActiBliz to hit them with a cease and desist right before launch. All that hard work, all those hours that the H2M team spent working on this mod, and it's all snuffed out in the blink of an eye. But if you thought all of that was unethical, I haven't even talked about Microsoft yet. So remember Hi-Fi Rush? You know, that really amazing rhythm-based hack-and-slash game from last year that was distributed by Microsoft? You may recall how successful it became after launch and how much everyone loved it. So, naturally, Microsoft's reaction to such a success was to look Tango Gameworks dead in the eye and say point blank,
"Congratulations! Your purpose has been fulfilled. Time to die." What?
Yep. After the success of Hi-Fi Rush, Microsoft pulled the plug on Tango Gameworks. Not even being successful will save you from being shuttered. That's actually legitimately frightening. Oh, and the best part is a day after pulling this stunt, Microsoft would say they need more games like Hi-Fi Rush. How does a company this fiscally successful not know what goes on in their company? If you admit that you need more games like the ones from the studio you just dismantled, clearly you made a huge mistake in dismantling said studio. And Tango Gameworks was already in production of new games when this happened. Now, I'll acknowledge that Tango wasn't the only company that Microsoft axed this year. Arcane Austin, the developers behind Redfall, also got dismantled by Microsoft. Granted, Redfall was a commercial and critical failure in and of itself, but remember, that was mostly due to Microsoft pushing the game out before it was finished. So Arcane Austin got screwed by Microsoft 2 years in a row, and now the staff of 4 whole companies are without jobs. Why? Well, when asked about this, Xbox President Sarah Bond responded with a load of nonsense that basically amounted to something long-term commitment. Oh, and another Xbox higher-up stated that the move was made to focus on blockbuster titles, saying that they needed to develop smaller games that could win them more awards. Which Hi-Fi Rush was! Yeah, Microsoft had no excuse for pulling the plug on Tango and Arcane, except for maybe acquiring more gaming studios, giving their CEO a $30 million pay raise, and even paying former ActiBliz CEO Bobby Kotick enough money to have kept both Tango Gameworks and Arcane Austin alive for over 17 years. This disgusting ogre, who should be in jail for sexual harassment and threatening to have his assistant killed, gets to walk away with enough money that could have kept 2 gaming studios fed for nearly 2 whole decades.
You people are a disgrace!
Gamers would take the steam to review bomb Hi-Fi Rush with positive reviews in support of Tango Gameworks. Wow, a situation where review bombing is actually a good thing. In fact, people were so mad about these companies getting shut down that an LA billboard paid tribute to both companies like a frickin' in memoriam. Thankfully, by a heavenly miracle, Tango Gameworks and the Hi-Fi Rush IP would be acquired by Krafton Inc., saving the studio from permanent closure. How did Microsoft react to this? Like an evil villain from a cartoon that just got their plans foiled again. It's honestly kind of pathetic. 2024 was easily the worst year for Microsoft since the Red Ring of Death days, and it's no coincidence that they would get into the #1 spot after adding ActiBliz to their list of acquisitions. They both share the same symptoms of having their higher-ups being gaslighting narcissistic abusers. So, it is with great pride and disdain that I hereby crown Microsoft, our new champion of gaming industry fails. Wear your crown of thorns proudly, Microsoft, because I highly doubt it's coming off anytime soon. I'm Josh Scorcher, and I have no sympathy for any of these villainous companies. Huh.
Cut!
Hey everyone, this is Josh. If you like this video, please like, subscribe, leave a comment, and share the video around. Please check out my other social media like my Twitter, Twitch, and Tumblr. Check out my other channels such as Joshua Burner for reactions and other stuff, Dragon Fighter Gaming for tabletop, and Bob Equestria for cartoons. Consider checking below the video and donating to my Patreon, Streamlabs for my merchandise, or becoming a YouTube member. Thanks for watching.